How's it going, YouTube? Today we're going to talk tie rods. This is the tie rod out of a Jeep Grand Cherokee WJ. In a solid front axle vehicle, this is what your tie rod looks like. You have tie rod ends on either side. They got like a little ball joint on the end that are threaded into the actual tie rod on either side. These little ball joints are connected to the steering knuckles, and this device physically ties your two wheels together. When someone says their tie rod ends have gone bad, what's happened in a solid front axle vehicle, these connections get loose. When these are brand new, all right, you can't move them by hand, but they wear out over time. This one's not actually horrible. I've seen some where you push it up and it'll just fall right back down. Symptoms of a bad tie rod or bad tie rod ends in a solid front axle vehicle are usually loose steering, sloppy steering. There's play, you know what I mean? Rather than there being a real tight connection between the two tires, there's a little bit of play because this thing can wiggle a little bit, you know? A lot of times you'll be able to go like this with your steering wheel without your wheels actually moving, you know? Maybe you've got an inch, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 inches of play before your wheels actually start moving. Today I want to do a real quick video on how to test or figure out if your loose steering issue or other issue is actually caused by bad tie rod ends. Testing your tie rod ends on a solid front axle vehicle is really very easy. Grab your tie rod or your drag link, whichever one you want to test, and you just try to spin it, you try to move it. And what you're doing is figuring out A, can you move it by hand, and B, how easily can you move it by hand. Now, unless your tie rod ends are brand new, you're probably going to be able to move them by hand. Brand new ones are stiff, but once they've been on the road a little bit, they get pretty easy to move. Now, if you can move them by hand, but where you put them, they stay, meaning I put this one up and it stays there, move it back down and it stays, that means they're in pretty good shape. If you go to pick it up like that and it falls right back down, or you can actually hear you can move them quick enough to hear a little click, it's usually a pretty good sign your tie rod ends are worn out. Alrighty, an independent front suspension vehicle is a completely different beast. Rather than having a tie rod that goes all the way across your vehicle, tying one vehicle to the other, you have two separate tie rods. All right, that's this right here, and they are connected to your steering rack, and your steering rack pushes or pulls the tie rod, and that's what moves your tire. What I want you to know is that you can use the same method to test your independent front suspension vehicle as you do your solid front axle vehicle. You just have to add one step. The first thing you do is you come underneath, you find your tie rod, and you do the same thing. Try to move it. All right, now the ball on this one is back here inside your tire a little bit, inside your wheel, so you grab it and you twist it. Now these, you can see there's some movement, but it's not easy to move them, and they stay where I put them. So while they're not brand new, they do have some time left. That's your outer tie rod link on an independent front suspension vehicle. Now you also need to test your inner tie rod link. Alrighty, to test an inner tie rod, get your wheel that you want to test off the ground, grab it at 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and give it a little shake. You hear that? That clicking? Now that could be one of two things. It could either be a wheel bearing or it could be an inner tie rod end. Let's investigate a little further. Alright, if we come back underneath the car and we move that same wheel, we can see that there seems to be play in the tie rod somewhere. This inner tie rod sleeve does not move while the whole rest of the tie rod does. If we zoom in up on the ball of the inner tie rod, see it? It's got a lot of play. And in fact, when I came down here, this dust boot, which is supposed to be tightly sealed up this way, was hanging down like that, which means this came loose. All the grease that was in here evacuated, dirt and water was able to get into that ball joint on the inner tie rod end and ruin it. And it caused excessive clearance, and that's why this Jeep has a little bit of a shake when you're braking and when you're accelerating over 50 miles an hour. And if we were to get the alignment checked right now, you wouldn't actually be able to have it aligned properly because the tire has all this play. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's actually a pretty significant amount of movement in the tire. So I'm going to have to get a new inner tie rod end and a new, I'll probably do the outer tie rod ends on this at the same time. And at some point we'll do a video on how to change those. Alright, there it is. It's really not that hard to check your tie rods. It's something that I usually do when I'm under there changing my oil anyway, because they have a lot to do with ride quality, you know, and tire wear. And if you're in a lifted Jeep, worn out tie rod ends, I have seen them contribute to death wobble. Alright, if you found this video helpful, if you found it entertaining, and I hope you did, by all means, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave me a comment. Thanks for watching. See you next time.